go back on the record in the case People versus Brandon Martin, RAF 1506112. Mr. Martin is present with both counsel. The people are present. All members of the jury and alternates are present. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
We are ready to conclude. Mr. Beecham, and rebuttal argument.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Mr. Jensen, during Mr. Jensen's closing remarks, I couldn't help think of a particular sports figure that's kind of apt for today, sticking with the baseball theme. And that was Yogi Berra. If you don't know who Yogi Berra is, or was, he died at the late age of 90 in 2015. But Yogi Berra is a Hall of Fame baseball player. He was a catcher for the Yankees, won 10 World Series titles. I think that's the most of any player ever. So he was very famous as a baseball player, but he was also famous for his so-called yogi-isms. Yogi-isms. And some of those famous yogi-isms were, the future ain't what it used to be. So think about that, it's kind of funny. Nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded, right? A nickel ain't worth a dime anymore. My personal favorite, though, is too coincidental to be a coincidence. Too coincidental to be a coincidence. And as I was listening to Mr. Jensen's closing remarks, I couldn't help think that what he's basically saying is that some unknown person went to that Winthrop address in the afternoon on some random Thursday. That unknown person somehow snuck into the residence without Ricky Anderson, Barry Swanson, and Mr. Martin, Michael Martin, knowing that he was there. Went inside that residence and looked around, grabbed a baseball bat that just happened to have Brandon Martin's name on it. And then just happened to go up to Ricky Anderson. And by surprise, this unknown person took the baseball bat and crushed in his skull over and over again. And at that time, when Barry Swanson is on that phone, goes over to try to assist or try to figure out what's going on, and only to meet his demise. And then that unknown person, with no motive whatsoever, decides to go and find a disabled person, Mr. Michael Martin, who's seated in a chair with no ability to defend himself, and take Brandon Martin's baseball bat and then proceed to crush in his skull as well. That random person, that unknown person, did not take any valuables from the house. That unknown person did all of this while Mr. Martin is asleep in the front yard. And that unknown person somehow leaves the residence and does not commit any other random killings that day. Too coincidental to be a coincidence. There's some talk about how there was no direct evidence in this case. Let's talk about that. And yes, that's true. There isn't a whole lot of direct evidence because if you recall, direct evidence is evidence that comes from witnesses that actually heard or saw something. But we do have direct evidence in this case. The direct evidence from Mr. Martin. He was there and he gave a statement. We have the direct evidence that places Brandon there at the time of the killings. We have the direct evidence by his own admissions that he went through the victim's pockets. We have the direct evidence, again, by his own admission, that he touched the instrument of death, as Mr. Kurz called it, the bat, with his bloody hands. We have the direct evidence, again by his own admission, that he left with victim Barry Swanson's vehicle without permission after finding everyone dead. That is a tremendous amount of direct evidence. No physical evidence. Well, we have the direct circumstantial. Remember, circumstantial evidence is evidence that helps you reach an inference, that allows you to infer the conclusion, a reasonable conclusion, and physical evidence. Well, we have the fact that Mr. Martin is found with the victim's cell phones. Why does he take the cell phones? And what does he do with the cell phones? He dumps them. And why does he dump them? Because he didn't want the police, by, again, his own admission, to track him. What's more important is what he doesn't do with the cell phones. Again, assuming that Mr. Martin is innocent, and ladies and gentlemen, he's still presumed innocent until you find otherwise. But this innocent man does not call 911. He just saw his father and his uncle beaten to death in his own house, yards away from where he was asleep, but he doesn't call anybody, doesn't try to help them, doesn't try to call anybody for assistance, and doesn't even check in with his other family members to see if they're still alive. He takes their wallets, right? And we know why the wallet was taken, because he needed the debit card to try to get some gas. And he tried to use that debit card. You saw that video from the ARCO station. And again, by his own admission, he was attempting to get gas with that stolen credit card. He was unable to do so. He steals Barry Swanson's truck. Again, minutes after Barry is struck to death, he takes his truck. Now, Mr. Jensen brought up a good point. Why didn't Brandon leave the city? Why is he hanging out for the rest of the night and into the next morning? Well, again, by his own admission, the direct evidence. He was wanting to go trade vehicles because Barry Swanson's truck didn't have a whole lot of gas, and he wasn't able to put gas in it. So his plan was to go back to the house that next morning and trade cars because he had the other set of keys for Ricky Anderson's vehicle. Unfortunately for Mr. Martin, but fortunately for the community of Corona, the police saw him, and they were able to apprehend him before he went back to the house. No blood on Mr. Martin's clothes. Well, what's important about that? Showing you People's 57. As I zoom in, because I know it's hard to see. That wall has blood spatter on it. In fact, the wall was pretty much caked with blood spatter all the way up to the ceiling, if you recall that. What does it not have? Cast off. That was an important fact. Cast off, if you recall, the blood spatter is when the impact causes the spatter to go across, in this case, the wall. The cast off is when somebody's bringing the instrument back at such a rate that the blood now casts off, and it can go in all sorts of directions, right? Including Mr. Martin's own clothing. There's no cast off in this case. And why is that not only important to explain why there's no evidence of blood on Mr. Martin's clothing, which I'll get to again in a minute, but also for the fact that he's taking a swing and another conscious, deliberate swing after another. In other words, he's not violently bringing the bat back, causing the cast-off. So the fact that there's no cast-off evidence in this case is extremely important. In addition, we know that the killer went to the bathroom and washed up, which further explains why there's no blood on Mr. Martin when found. In addition, he had time to change. He had time to change at the house, grab some clothing from his room. He had time all night to change, which explains why there's no blood found on him. Mr. Martin has no motive. Well, we know that he didn't like his dad very much. He mentioned about a month before the murders, he called his dad a racial slur and had other unkind things to say about him. He threatened his family 2 days before, which caused the police to be called. He was told, again, by his own admission, which is direct evidence, not to go home when he left ETS. So this is important for his state of mind. Okay, so two days ago, my family called the cops on me, and then they put me in ETS. And then now I'm leaving ETS, and my family's telling me not to go home. And where's the first place he goes? Home. Now, as he's on that bus going home, contemplating what's going to happen, as he's walking up that 50 or so minute walk from the bus stop to his residence, contemplating, deciding what he's going to do. What does he see when he gets home? The locks are changed. There's a security guy there that is putting in a security system to keep him out again. Then, of course, there's evidence of that ultimatum that he was supposed to either leave their house or go get substance abuse treatment. So all these is weighing on the defendant. What are the actions of the so-called innocent man? Right? What are his actions when the police try to apprehend him? Mr. Jensen stated that it doesn't appear that Mr. Martin has the ability to reflect, basically the ability to deliberate, to make a careful consideration, to weigh the consequences. So I'd like to talk about that. And he mentioned that he sounded like an 8 to a 10-year-old in that interview. The evidence is for you to consider. So if you think that he sounded like an 8 to 10-year-old, then I got nothing for that. But the evidence is the evidence. But I will tell you this, that as young as Mr. Martin was in 2015, 22 years of age, as we learned, what was he able to do before that? He signed an $860,000 contract. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a lot of money, and I think it still is a lot of money today. An $860,000 contract to play professional baseball. Now, what's important about that? There's a couple of things. One, well, he was able to do that just fine. He was able to get that money and actually blow through it in a few years. Okay? But he can't be able to be found guilty of murder because he cannot have the ability to really consider or weigh his decision-making. All right. Well, what about the fact that he's a professional baseball player? And what do professional baseball players have to do when they're at bat? when that 90-mile-per-hour ball comes barreling down to the plate. They have literally a split second to decide whether they're going to swing or not swing. This is a professional athlete whose job is to deliberate, to make decisions. Now, think of it this way. When Brandon comes to the house, he has to make that decision to pick up the baseball bat. And what are the reasons why you're going to use a baseball bat? Either play baseball or hurt somebody. So he picks up that baseball bat, goes over to Ricky Anderson, and by surprise, crushes the back of his skull. That takes a lot of deliberation. In that, you have to consider that you're picking up that bat and you're going to swing it at the most vulnerable place on a human body. He didn't hit him in the back. He didn't hit him in the stomach. He didn't hit him in the legs or the arms. He hit him in the back of his skull. And then as Barry fell, now either on the ground or near the ground, over and over again to the most vulnerable place on a human body, to their head. So assuming that, let's give him that first hit that did not cause the blood spatter. Let's give him that was a rash decision. It wasn't cold and calculated, okay? What about those additional blows after blow after blow? Not just to the back of the head, but to his throat. And the pain that would have caused Mr. Anderson as his hyoid broke, his own uncle. So even if we give him that first strike, not deliberating at that, or premeditation, each and every blow to the most vulnerable part of the human body is. During this time, Barry Swanson comes over, presumably either to help or to figure out what's going on. Barry Swanson getting hit and hit and hit, trying to defend himself, which is unfortunate because Mr. Swanson is there to try to keep Mr. Martin out. He was just there doing his job, trying to do his job. And as he's hit over and over again, Brandon, in one area of the kitchen, strikes him in the head. Strikes him again because the first hit doesn't cause blood spatter on the head. Now there's blood spatter on the kitchen island. And then either Mr. Swanson was falling to the ground or trying to get up, but near you People's 133. But near that doorknob at the pantry, he struck again, causing more blood spatter in that kitchen area. Then unfortunately for Mr. Swanson, as he's on the ground, as you can see at the bottom of this photo, he's moving his hand, causing the blood smearing on the wall. He's hit multiple times, and this is after somebody's already been killed. If that's not deliberation, if that's not premeditation, if that's not the most intentional killing, then I don't know what is. But Mr. Martin doesn't stop there. This all right now is a horror story. This all right now is unfathomable for all of us. But he doesn't stop there. He goes over to his father. The father who, I guess, his ability is limited to 1-pound weights. And as he's he's just sitting there. He's defenseless. And then he takes the bat. Again, as Mr. Kerr said, hits him in the exact same spot over and over again with such force to actually transfer paint from the bat to the skull. And if that's not premeditation, if that's not deliberation, if that's not the most intentional murder, then I don't know what is. Again, going back to what Mr. Jensen said about Mr. Martin's ability or inability to really be to deliberate or reflect on his actions. Consider the fact that on September 18th, 2015, at approximately 9:40 in the morning, Mr. Martin is found by the cops. And Officer Velasco activates her overhead lights. And what does Mr. Martin do? He stops. He's able to understand that there's a police officer behind him, and again, by his own admission, he stops. She gives him commands to put his hands outside the window, which he does. He's complying. And then when other officers arrive to the scene, what does he do? He flees. That takes an ability to reflect, an ability to weigh the conduct, and to make that decision. And so he decided to flee. So as he's fleeing, he's going from running stop sign and stop sign. And each time he's running a stop sign, he's got to make that deliberate choice. Am I going to stop? Am I going to run it? What could happen? Premeditation and deliberation, consider this. When somebody's approaching a stop signal or a lighted signal, as you're approaching it and it turns amber or yellow, everybody here, I'm sure, has run a yellow light. Okay, that's pretty common. But I'm sure everyone here, as they get to that yellow light, they make that decision. You decide, okay, am I going to stop? Is it going to change? Should I stop? Is it safe to run it? If I run it, am I putting others in danger? Or did it just barely turn yellow and I have plenty of time to make it through? That's a quick decision that each and every single one of us make. Mr. Martin was able to make the decision to run a red light and to endanger the community, the citizens of Corona, a near collision, and 4 pit maneuvers later, when he's finally crashed into and disabled, his vehicle disabled, he gets out, and what does he do? He flees. These are all conscious, deliberate decisions he makes. So we know he can do that. We know that this ball player that can sign an $860,000 contract can make these decisions just fine. So with this information that the Corona police have, that he's wanted for a triple murder, that he stole a vehicle, he stole other items from these individuals, that he fled the police, running stop signs, running a stop signal, runs into a poor woman's house who's just taking a shower. And as she's taking a shower, he's up in her room. This violent individual who will not give up. These are all his choices that he makes. All the decision making, all the weighing of the consequences he makes. And then when he jumps out the window and he's lying on the ground and the officers don't know if he's going to go into somebody else's house. They don't know if he's going to go across the street to the elementary school and get a hostage or two. They don't know if he's armed. But what they do know is that he's wanted for murder, for multiple murders. And so what choice do they have? They have a canine unit. They have a helicopter. They have an armed vehicle. They have the house surrounded because they want to keep the community safe. And they ask him for compliance, and he refuses to comply. So yeah, they send a dog on him, and the dog bites him. Yeah, I get it. It probably hurt. But as he's fighting with the dog bites him in different areas. And yeah, he got his groin bit. Well, he should have complied. Those officers did everything they could to keep Corona safe. And thank God they apprehended him. Because, ladies and gentlemen, he's guilty of every single murder. He's guilty of the special circumstance. He's guilty of evading the police. He's guilty of stealing poor Barry Swanson's truck. He's guilty for slamming that police dog Dex down on the concrete. Go find them and such. I want to leave you with this. What is an abiding conviction? An abiding conviction, as the judge read you, is the knowledge that the truth of the charge sticks with you over time. It's the knowledge of the truth of the charge. An abiding conviction means that, let's say that you came to verdicts today, guilty verdicts. It means tomorrow morning you can wake up and you can look yourself in the mirror and say, you know what? I brought justice to Michael Martin. That poor guy that was disabled, sitting in a chair that met his death at the hands of his own son. It means a year from now, maybe you get caught in jury service again. You can reflect upon your decisions and know that the truth of the charge about Mr. Ricky Anderson, about how he was beaten to death by his nephew. It means maybe 5 years from now, you could be thinking about this terrible case, and it is a terrible case. And you could be thinking, you know what? I am damn proud that the people proved this case beyond a reasonable doubt, because there is a person by the name of Barry Swanson that just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And I'm, maybe proud is not the right word, but I stand by my decision. I stand by my decision, not that I liked it, but that I made my decision of guilt. Thank you.